Have you ever been in one of those situations, a real head scratcher, where making a decision felt just incredibly complicated?
Oh, definitely.
It wasn't just a simple right or wrong, was it? More like a tangled mess of consequences, intentions, maybe competing values.
Yeah, those are the tough ones. Could be personal, could be work.
Exactly. Maybe a personal dilemma or perhaps a tough call at work that impacted, well, a lot of people. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into the, let's face it, often misunderstood world of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
It's a field that, it can seem full of lofty philosophical ideas, maybe a bit abstract, but it profoundly shapes our everyday lives, doesn't it? From tiny choices to, well, global policies affecting millions.
Absolutely. It's everywhere, even when we don't notice it.
So our mission today is to unpack some foundational ethical theories and then right away see how they actually play out in real-world scenarios. Think of it as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on this crucial subject.
And what's really fascinating, looking at our sources, is the sheer breadth of perspectives.
Yeah.
I mean, so many ways to think about what makes an action right or wrong.
Right.
It's this rich tapestry of thought, ancient ideas right up to modern problems, showing how different lenses shape our moral understanding. And look, this deep dive isn't about us telling you what to think.
No, not at all.
It's about giving you frameworks to think.
Oh.
Tools to critically analyze ethical dilemmas, connecting the theory to what actually happens.
Absolutely. We'll explore what ethics truly entails, look at these diverse approaches, and there's sometimes surprising, maybe even contradictory consequences. It should be a really captivating conversation. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's unpack this core, really foundational question. What actually makes an action right?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah. And a lot of theories, often called consequentialist or teleological, they argue that the outcome, the result of an action, is what truly matters most.
Exactly. It's all about the ends, fundamentally.
The ends, not necessarily the means.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the basic premise of consequentialism is, well, pretty straightforward. Judge an action by its results. Simple enough on the surface.
Seems simple.
But within that, there's a huge spectrum. Because the key question becomes, whose consequences are we talking about? And that's where you get these very distinct versions.
Okay, so let's break those down.
First up, we have ethical egoism, which, the name kind of gives it away, right? It's a me-first approach.
Right.
It says that a moral agent ought to do what is solely in their own self-interest. The consequences for the individual doing the action are paramount. Everything else is secondary.
Okay, so give us an example. Like if you're in a disaster scenario.
Saving yourself first would be the ethically egoist choice.
Yeah.
It taps into that primal survival instinct, you could say.
Makes sense in that context.
Or a more provocative example that comes up in ethical discussions. Imagine a young person who thinks their greatest good lies in, say, murdering a rich uncle to inherit millions.
Whoa. Okay. That's dark, but it illustrates the point starkly. It's purely about my benefit.
Exactly. And it's not just simple self-preservation. The theory suggests you should always optimize for your benefit. Now, you can immediately see how this gets deeply problematic in, say, public service.
Oh, absolutely. If public servants prioritized personal gain over public good.
It could lead to systemic corruption, maybe even societal breakdown if taken to an extreme. You have philosophers like Ayn Rand who championed a version of this, famously saying, man exists for his own sake, and achievement of his own happiness is his highest moral purpose.
Right. A very strong stance.
It is. And it's important, just briefly, to distinguish this from psychological egoism.
Okay, what's the difference?
Psychological egoism just describes human behavior. It says humans are always pursuing their own well-being, maybe unconsciously. Ethical egoism prescribes, it says, this is how people should act morally. One's descriptive, one's prescriptive.
Got it. That's a useful distinction. So what's the opposite of me first?
Well, that brings us directly to ethical altruism, the others first perspective.
Okay.
This theory states individuals have a moral obligation to help or benefit others, often even if it means sacrificing their own self-interest. An action is right if its consequences are more favorable to everyone except the agent.
Wow. So if egoism is maximizing good for me, altruism is maximizing good for everyone but me. That's a really stark contrast, isn't it?
It is, almost poetic, like you said. Think about someone like Kailash Satyarthi, dedicating his life to child rights, often at great personal risk. That's a powerful example.
Definitely.
Or look at Indoor's Beggar Free campaign mentioned in the sources. relocating people to shelters, providing job opportunities, clearly benefiting a vulnerable group, prioritizing their well-being.
That makes sense.
Interestingly, Ayn Rand, being the champion of egoism, strongly criticized altruism. She argued self-sacrifice wasn't morally superior, but actually a societal burden.
So completely opposing views there. Highlights the philosophical tension.
Absolutely. It's a deeply divided landscape. Now, the third major consequentialist theory, and probably the most well-known, is utilitarianism.
Yes, Bentham and Mill.
Yeah. Exactly. Articulated by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. This one focuses on maximizing overall happiness or good for the greatest number of people.
The greatest good for the greatest number. We hear that phrase a lot.
We do. And Mill added an important nuance. He divided pleasure into higher pleasures, intellectual, artistic pursuits, and lower pleasures, more sensual ones. He argued we should prioritize the higher intellectual pleasures.
So it's not just any pleasure, but a better quality of pleasure for the most people. That adds a layer, doesn't it?
It does. It adds sophistication.
But what's the catch? I mean, focusing on the greatest number sounds good, but what might get overlooked?
That's the profound challenge, actually. It's a major criticism. While utilitarianism aligns well with collective happiness, democratic ideals, it can tend to ignore the means used to get that outcome.
Yeah.
And crucially, it can lead to what's called majoritarianism.
Meaning
it could potentially overlook or even justify sacrificing the rights or well-being of a minority group if it benefits the majority.
Okay. I see the problem.
Think about a pharmaceutical company releasing a vaccine, like the COVID vaccines. The decision is often justified because the benefits for the vast majority outweigh the severe side effects experienced by a small percentage. It's a utilitarian calculation.
That's a classic real-world example, or like the source mentioned, the government protecting, say, millions of small retailers against huge e-commerce firms.
Exactly. That's aiming for the good of the larger number. Or the Supreme Court pushing a private hospital to treat poor patients, according to its agreement again, pushing for broader public benefit over private profit in that instance.
It's a powerful framework, clearly, but yeah, those edge cases, they make you think. So, okay, we've looked at consequences. Me first with egoism, everyone else first with altruism, and the greatest number first with utilitarianism. But what happens when things aren't so clear-cut? When intent and outcome maybe don't align, or when ethics is less about the action itself and more about, well, character, or even just cultural norms.
This is where things get really complex, you're right. The focus shifts. We start looking at that tricky relationship between intent versus outcome and how our inner values, our beliefs, really shape our outer actions.
Okay.
And one fascinating concept here is the doctrine of double effect, often called DDE.
Doctrine of double effect, what's that about?
Basically, the DDE says it can be morally acceptable to perform an action that has both a good effect and a bad effect.
Okay. Under what conditions?
As long as the bad effect is not intended, even if you can foresee it happening. And crucially, the good effect has to outweigh the bad. Organizations, governments, they often use this kind of reasoning.
Can you give an example? Like maybe demonetization. The stated intent was good, like curbing black money.
Exactly. Even if negative side effects on the economy or daily life were foreseen, the argument could be made that the intended good outweighed the unintended bad.
Right. Or like a doctor giving strong pain meds to a terminally ill patient.
Perfect example. The primary intent is easing suffering. A foreseen but unintended side effect might be shortening life expectancy slightly. DDE could justify that. It was even used, as you mentioned, for things like rapid vaccine rollouts. The intent was massive public health benefit, accepting some foreseen unintended side effects.
But not everyone buys into this, right?
No. John Stuart Mill, the utilitarian, basically argued intent is irrelevant in moral analysis. Only outcomes matter. And Abraham Lincoln had that great quote about few things being wholly evil or good, requiring a judgment of, the overall balance, the preponderance. It's definitely a delicate balancing act.
It sounds like it. So moving deeper into those inner values.
Yes, we encountered Dayanand Saraswati's knower-doer split. This is a really insightful concept.
Knower-doer split. Tell me more.
It suggests that when we ignore our own ethical standards, when we know deep down what's right, but we do what's wrong, we create this profound internal conflict, a split.
Okay. So, like, when a politician lies, even if they think it's for a good reason, they know they're contradicting the truth. That creates this split inside.
Precisely. And it's more than just a bad feeling. This split is genuinely harmful. It leads to internal condemnation, a kind of fractured sense of self, and ultimately, it degrades your quality of life. The sources put it well. Our outer behavior reflects how far we abide by inner value system.
That makes sense. The more aligned you are, the more integrated.
And authentic and at peace you are. Conversely, living in this split erodes trust, both public and self-trust. The example given is Pakistan's denial of harboring terrorists. Despite knowing the truth, this creates a kind of national knower-doer split, damaging credibility.
It's a powerful application. What about karma? That feels related to inner states and consequences.
Very much so. The doctrine of karma asserts that every single action has consequences, without exception. Cause produces effect, present actions determine future effects.
As you sow, so shall you reap.
Exactly that. And crucially, there's no mutual cancellation. You can't do a bad deed and then do a good deed to wipe the slate clean.
Really? So, a businessman who uses unethical means to get rich, but then donates a lot to charity.
According to karma, he'd face the negative consequences of the unethical actions and the positive consequences of the charity separately. They don't just balance out. It implies a sort of immutable cosmic justice.
That's quite different from some Western ideas of atonement or balancing the books.
It is, and what's also fascinating is the idea of collective karma. It applies to groups, families, societies, nations.
So a group's actions have collective consequences.
Yes. The source mentions examples like sons paying a father's debts, or innocent citizens suffering from wars started by their leaders, or the overall prosperity or suffering of a nation reflecting its collective actions. The example used is Pakistan's alleged support for a terror attack, leading to consequences like Operation Sindoor and international condemnation, collective action, collective consequence. It functions like a psychological and moral thermostat.
Interesting metaphor. Okay, shifting gears slightly, what about focusing not on actions or consequences, but just on being a good person?
Now you're talking about virtue ethics. This approach, championed by figures like Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, fundamentally emphasizes being a good person.
Right.
The focus is on developing good character traits, virtues, to lead a moral life. It prioritizes who you are over following specific rules or just calculating consequences.
So it's less what should I do and more what kind of person should I be.
Exactly.
And that brings to mind the classic cardinal virtues. Prudence, justice.
Prudence or wisdom, justice meaning fairness, temperance or self-restraint, and courage or fortitude.
Yes.
Cultivating these is key.
Is there a modern example?
Actually, a really beautiful one cited was from the recent Paris Olympics. Bingjiao from China won silver in badminton, but immediately after, she held up a small pin with the Spanish flag.
Why?
To honor Carolina Marin, her opponent, who had to withdraw due to injury. That wasn't required by any rule. It was pure sportsmanship, empathy, character. That's virtue ethics in action.
That's a great example. Okay, one more framework. What about culture's role?
Right. This brings us to cultural ethical relativism, or CER. This concept basically states that morality is entirely dependent on the standards, practices, and norms accepted by a specific social group at a specific place and time.
The old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Pretty much sums it up. So what's considered ethical in one culture might be completely unethical, even forbidden, in another.
Like drinking alcohol or gambling, widely accepted in some Western countries, but considered unethical in many Middle Eastern Islamic nations.
Perfect example. Proponents argue morality is just a product of culture, so it can't be universal.
But surely there are criticisms of that view.
Oh, major criticisms. First, how do you even clearly define a culture, especially today with globalization? People belong to multiple cultures.
Good point.
Second, what about actions that cross cultural boundaries? Whose rules apply? And third, maybe the most profound criticism. If CER is strictly true, doesn't it make moral progress impossible? Well, if every culture's moral code is equally valid just because it exists, how can we ever say one practice is better or more just than another? How can we argue for universal human rights or condemn practices like slavery if they were culturally accepted at the time? It makes reform very difficult to justify philosophically.
Yeah, that definitely creates a conundrum. It feels like it could justify almost anything.
It's a tricky one.
Okay, it's truly fascinating seeing how these different frameworks focusing on consequences, intent, virtue, culture offer such different ways of looking at right and wrong. How do these scale up? How do they clash maybe when we think about ethics in the public sphere, in politics, business, dealing with new tech?
That's the critical next step, isn't it? Connecting these individual frameworks to broader societal structures.
Yeah.
And the relationship between politics and ethics is, well, let's just say it's a classic debate, often quite heated.
Yeah, you often hear people say politics and ethics just don't mix. It's framed as realism versus idealism, or maybe means versus ends.
Exactly. There's that common perception. And you have arguments against ethics in politics, often citing Machiavelli, the end justifies the means.
Right. The idea that leaders sometimes have to do unethical things for stability or power.
Yeah.
People point to figures like Hitler or scandals like Watergate as examples of this supposed incompatibility.
Precisely. The argument is that politics demands a certain pragmatism, maybe even ruthlessness, that ethics gets in the way of. But
there's another side.
a very strong other side. There are powerful arguments for ethics in politics. Think of Mahatma Gandhi saying, "Truth has drawn me into the field of politics," and calling politics without principle a sin.
A completely different perspective.
Completely. Dr. Kalam's career is often cited as an example of ethical leadership in public life. Even something like sin taxes on tobacco or alcohol, that's an ethical political decision prioritizing public health.
Good point.
So while, yeah, they can seem at odds sometimes, you really need both for a functioning, just society. Politics without ethics risks becoming tyranny. Ethics without political mechanisms struggles to have widespread impact.
They need each other, in a way.
I think so. And this leads naturally to ethics in public versus private life. The core idea here, from our sources, is that ethics in public life have to be grounded in ethics in private life.
Meaning you can't really separate the two. The person you are at home influences the leader you are in public.
Exactly. Your private life, family, friends, personal choices, that's where your self-morality is tested and practiced, the values you hold when nobody's watching. It suggests you really have to practice values before you can credibly preach them or expect others to follow them.
Like that story about Gandhiji and the sugar.
Yes. He waited a month to stop eating sugar himself before advising a young boy to do the same. That's private integrity informing public action. Because in public life, politics, business, etc., leaders influence so many other lives. Their ethical compass, or lack thereof, has huge ripple effects.
So how do you actually build that ethical foundation in the public sector?
Well, creating a culture of ethics in the public sector is crucial. And it's not just about having a rule book. It's more than just a flu shot to prevent scandals. It needs to be systemic.
Okay, so what does that involve?
Key strategies include adopting values-based codes of ethics focusing on principles like fairness and integrity, not just ticking boxes, clear legal frameworks, universal application so no one's above the rules, proper training, and critically, leadership by example.
Leadership by example feels huge.
It is. Plus transparency, accountability, whistleblower protection, clear guidelines for public-private interactions. It's a whole ecosystem.
Are there core principles guiding this?
Yes. Nolan's 7 principles of public life are a fantastic benchmark. They cover selflessness, acting only in the public interest, integrity, avoiding undue influence, objectivity, making choices on merit, accountability, being answerable for decisions, openness, transparency, honesty, being truthful, and leadership, promoting these principles.
Those sound like solid pillars.
They are. And you see them reflected in things like the Right to Information Act or efforts to ensure objective recruitment for civil servants. Even the government launching an AI competency framework for public officials, consciously embedding ethics into digital governance. That's a modern application.
It shows ethics has to evolve with the times, too.
Absolutely. And that's reflected in the evolving roles of public servants. They're not just administrators anymore.
How so?
They're increasingly expected to be innovators, finding new ways to deliver services, enablers, fostering partnerships like with citizens in the Swachhbharat, integrators working across different departments for common goals like the new education policy, facilitators helping citizens navigate complex systems like taxes, and advocates, especially for marginalized groups.
That sounds incredibly demanding. I'm thinking of Manoj Bajpayee's character in Family Man.
Yes. That show captures it brilliantly, doesn't it? The constant balancing act between personal life, national security, and the complex, often morally gray, demands of being a civil servant today. It really does. Okay, finally, let's pivot to a really contemporary challenge where all these ethical lenses, consequences, intent, virtue, culture really collide.
Mm-hmm.
The world of online gaming.
Online gaming. Yes, it's a fascinating and ethically charged area. On the one hand, huge benefits, right?
Sure. Creativity, getting comfortable with tech, problem solving, teamwork.
Collaboration, motivation, definitely. But the ethical issues are significant and growing. Game designers wield enormous influence. They literally create the contexts that shape players' attitudes, their ideas.
And we see problems like stereotyping.
Frequently, issues around gender, race, communities, these can subtly manipulate thoughts, especially in young gamers. And then there's addiction.
A massive concern.
Huge. It pulls kids away from education, impacts mental and physical health. It also often means less time for traditional outdoor play, potentially eroding those face-to-face social skills, friendship, brotherhood.
And the violence aspect. That's a big debate. But concerns persist that constant exposure to violent shooting games could contribute to real-world violent tendencies. We see reports linking it to increased youth violence in some contexts.
What about the money side? Gambling.
That's exploded, hasn't it? Gambling mechanics built into games, standalone apps promising cheap and quick money. These can easily dupe people, especially vulnerable kids. It really compromises the purity of just playing a game.
And the consequences can be devastating.
Tragically, yes. People losing huge sums, leading to debt, even suicide in extreme cases, or falling into illicit activities to fund the habit. There's also the ethical dimension of celebrity endorsements. Celebrities promoting these platforms, sometimes without fully considering or taking responsibility for the potential harm.
So how do we navigate this ethically?
It requires a multi-pronged approach. Ethical game design principles from the start. A role for the education system in teaching critical engagement with games. Developers need to be responsible, think about side effects, maybe even use games to teach ethical principles.
And regulation?
Definitely. Modernizing anti-gambling laws to cover these new forms. Holding endorsers accountable. Clearer regulations, especially for protecting minors. And educating families and teachers is key. It's encouraging that some major industry associations, as mentioned in the source, have actually introduced a code of ethics for real money gaming platforms.
Like Dream 11, PokerBazi, trying to promote responsible gaming.
Exactly. It shows an awareness, at least, that ethics has to be part of the conversation.
So, after covering all this ground, what does it all mean for you, the listener? We've journeyed through this complex landscape of ethics, from pure self-interest to the well-being of whole societies, from ancient philosophies right up to digital dilemmas like online gaming. And I think what we've seen is that understanding ethics isn't just about learning a list of rules.
Not at all.
It's about grasping the full spectrum of consequences, the subtle importance of intentions, the value of cultivating virtues like courage and fairness, and understanding the cultural and social context we all operate within.
And it's such a vital reminder, isn't it, that every decision you make, even choices that feel purely personal, that carry broader implications, they're always made within a social context, shaped by values you've learned, absorbed. That line between personal and social ethics, it's never really a hard and fast line. They're deeply intertwined.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Given all these diverse ethical lenses we've explored today, utilitarianism, virtue ethics, the knower-doer split, cultural relativism, and the rest, how might understanding these different frameworks shift your approach the next time you face a complex decision? Whether it's something personal or a public concern you're grappling with, what stands out to you as the most powerful or maybe the most useful ethical framework for navigating our complicated world today, and why?